One of the interesting things is that people just really focus on like that bottom line number. Like I have to be making like X amount of dollars a year. And of course, that's really important. I mean, we all have bills to pay and, everyone's situation is different and it is important how much you take home. But at the same time, it's so important to kind of really factor in all of the other things.
Like I worked for someone who, when I was pregnant, I'd have to take off for a meeting because, for an appointment. And then they were like, oh, so you're going to make up that half an hour you took off? No, when? Like, I have small children and I have another one on the way. And like, no, I can't stay late because, I have daycare to only this time. And so it wasn't in an office environment that I had to necessarily bill because of the type of work I have, but it was just, just pay me a half an hour less. And for this one firm, it wasn't sinking in. And I was just like, and then they ended up laying me off during my maternity leave. And I was like, well, that kind of sucked. So, finding someone who was friendly to having small children, like I started with the one attorney right when my kid was, my second one was 8 weeks old. And just having the flexibility to know if I had a sick kid, if I had a daycare issue today, if there was a federal holiday that my kids didn't have daycare through the military, I could have off and I knew I still had a job.
Yeah.
And I never got paid less. He paid me. He's like, you work, even though if you work less hours, you still get the amount of work done. We're not behind. You're always keeping up with things. So I never worried, well, crap, I'm not going to get enough for this, pay cycle to not pay my bills. And so I didn't, I respected him and he respected me. And so, to really, and I worked for him for 10 years just to get, through those years of, oh, I got this school thing, I got to run to drop the kids off. At a big firm, I couldn't do that. If you got trial, if you got this, you need to be there 12, 16 hours a day. And, if you don't have family, being military, we didn't have family living there. So we couldn't just say, hey, so-and-so is going to pick up the kids today. I'm great. So that was a huge important factor for me, just to know, I could have work and I could have life, and my family. And that was, a big important factor. And part of the reason why I went freelance.
Well, and it's great that you bring that up because I think a lot of people really question, like, how do they know, when it's time? So was there kind of, I guess, when you were thinking, if you think back, like to before you started doing freelance, was that something that you were kind of thinking about, like gradually over time, like, hey, in the future, I would like to start doing freelance? Or how did that kind of come to you that was something that you were going to be interested in doing?
It actually fell in my lap. I had no intentions of being freelance. We were living in San Diego at the time. My mother just had passed away. It was stressful. My health was having issues with an autoimmune disorder. My husband was just out of the military. We didn't have any more family back in California anymore. And so we decided we were just going to sell our house and move to the Midwest, near my husband's family. And no jobs, no anything. I was just going to take a break because, I needed to heal. I needed to spend some time. My kids were just turning to be teenagers. I needed to be able to pick them up after school instead of having after school care. I wanted to do those things before my kids were in college. And so we just decided we were done. So I gave my notice to my attorney. We sold our house and we moved. And so no intentions of working for a few years. And then after we got settled, we got our stuff, my attorney that I left, super nice. He was just like, hey, so you're working on this case. Can you still do this, thing? Can you do this project? Because you were working on it. And so then, technology was great. So this was like 6 years ago. And so he sent me this thing. So I just thought, okay, I'd finish up these few cases. And then it turned into well, why don't you do this other thing for this new case? And then one of the other attorneys I worked for in office for 10 years that I had left was like, hey, so can you do these couple of things for me? And so it just really fell into it. So didn't advertise, didn't do anything. I just started doing projects for the attorney friends that I used to have. So I got set up with remote access, I did create a contract right away. The one attorney, helped me do that. And, then it was just friends of friends, this attorney's like, hey, I'm in a specialized area of law. So then, it's a small community. And so it's like, oh, hey, Sally can do these things. And so then it was just referred. So now, and now I turn away business.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. So it's like, but yeah, so really, I had zero intentions of freelancing, never thought I would. I thought after I'd settled down, I would just find a firm here in the Midwest, learn their, area of law that I do. And I still have no idea how to do the law that I do in California that I do here. So, I mean, like I would be clueless. So, but it's worked out really well.
Yeah. I think that kind of highlights like an important consideration, and a question that a lot of people ask all the time is, how much experience do I need to have freelancing? Or, how much do I need to have before I start freelancing? And I think that it's really, not just having the experience of doing the work, but also having that network. Like if you already have that network built up of attorneys that you've worked for or that you've worked with, or attorneys who like know of you or know of your work product, or that you've networked with before, it's so much easier. And for me, it was the same way. And even now, I almost exclusively only do freelance work for attorneys that I had previously worked for. Like it's very unusual for me to do freelance work for people that I'm just kind of like meeting for the first time. It's almost always someone that I just already knew from either working with them, working opposite them, or just somehow have had contact with them, in my previous career. So I think it's really an important consideration, especially for people who come in and say, well, I'm just graduating school. I have never worked as a paralegal. And I think I would much rather be freelance instead of, be an in the office employee. It's kind of like, well, getting that network is really going to make your life a lot easier, not just because you have to know how to do the work and to be able to work independently and without, having to get that kind of constant supervision that you're getting in the office, but also to have that kind of network of people built up that can kind of speak to, your work and how it is to work with you. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I was nearly 20 years in office, so in San Diego. So I mean, working in the same area, I'd done some work before, but just, doing that. And so when we moved, I started very young. My mother-in-law was a paralegal, so I worked in her office over summers when I was in high school. And so, so I had experience. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have, I worked as a receptionist. I worked, then I working into a secretary. I listened to what the secretaries were doing when I was 19 years old and had a full-time receptionist job at a firm. I asked questions, just, hey, why did we do it this way? Or what do we, and then just reading the mail that came in, doing the things just to start seeing what are these things and what are we doing? And so I had no legal quote experience. And then, but I was just absorbing. And so like, even at 19, I went to my first trial because the attorney saw when I was just matching up depo summaries to say, oh, this person's inconsistent. So he saw that there was something there that I was able to put the pieces together. And at 19 years old, I sat at my first trial and the judge referred to me as his associate. And I'm like, I'm not even old enough to drink. But because I took the initiative, just to learn, it was huge. And then, then I worked up and then I worked into a paralegal position and then I got education. So, got my certificate. It's not ABA. For me, I already had the experience, so I just needed the pretty piece of paper. So I didn't need to spend 2 years doing it. In my case, it was fine because I work in estate planning, trust, and probate. Ours don't really care if they were ABA. And then later than that, I ended up with my degree in accounting and tax because I work in estate planning, probate, trust administration, post-death. So accounting for me, so I really don't quote have a paralegal legal education, but it works because now people come to me because of my tax benefit. I do estate taxes, I do gift taxes. And so I'm able to network with people who do high-end planning and who seek me out because I have that knowledge that a lot of people don't have. And so it's, for me, I just don't do, I've done civil, but I'm not. So it really, they expect me to be able to do my job with little instruction, and if you don't have that experience of being in office, it's super. I just remember if I was like 20 years old back in the law firm again, trying to say, oh, can you draft these things? I'd be like, what things? And so it's big for me to say that you at least need, I mean, I would say even 10 years of really solid experience to freelance.
Yeah, I completely agree. I usually tell people around 10 years as well. And I think, of course, there's always exceptions. Some people just really excel at, whatever type of work that it is that they're doing. And, maybe they just get into kind of like a really great area that they can just go out there and get it done. But I think even if you're kind of already at that stage where you can just work independently with little supervision, of course, we're always supervised, but there's definitely a difference between being in the office full time with coworkers and with the attorneys versus, being at home and just kind of working independently and then delivering more of a finished product to the attorneys. I think that can be really difficult, but just, also I think it really comes down to kind of having that confidence and also just having that in-office experience. I think that just helps you kind of be more well-rounded and, build up that confidence and build up that network, which I think is really important. So you mentioned that you really don't advertise. Do you have a website or no?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's literally word of mouth for my, I was active in the San Diego Bar Association, so then there were CLEs because in California, we have to maintain certain requirements. So I would go to the probate lunch. Sometimes we needed to hear what the judges were putting out for our probate judges. And so if my attorney couldn't go, I would go. So we networked with other, this guy did really good in retirement tax. And so we would talk to them. And so it was a small community. So we knew each other. And even the paralegals would show up because it was such a small community and we needed to know what was going on with their probate court. And so I don't advertise. I mean, I now work in San Diego and LA. It ended up happening, an attorney in LA called the head of the probate association at the time for a paralegal referral to do an accounting for San Diego. And I had worked with her firm before. She was really good friends of mine. So she's like, hey, can I refer you? And so she did. And, I prepared this accounting for this attorney. He ended up retiring and giving me to an attorney up in, LA, Beverly Hills. And now I do a good chunk of work for him, and so it's literally just relationship wise. So it's like, I've never met these people in person, but I've been referred to them through people. And, so it's like always like one step, relationship. I knew this person, worked with them, I'm referred to this person. And, it's really worked out better for me. So I don't have a website. I mean, I have a LinkedIn page, but I don't specialize in anything. And it's literally word of mouth.
But no, I mean, I think that that's fantastic. I think it's obviously preferable if you can get enough work that way rather than, kind of dealing with like cold calls and just people. I mean, I know probably a pretty good percentage of the time when I'm contacted by someone who's just like reaching out to see if I can, help them with a job, it's rarely in an area of law that I practice or not that I practice, but that I work in. I get a lot of people who reach out to me for real estate related work and, things like that. And it's really it's almost never something that I actually do myself. So do you have to provide any benefits or do you get all of your benefits through your spouse?
It's through my spouse. So, being military and government, I've always relied on him so I'm grateful that I have a spouse that has it, but it's also a little bit of give that, in office, I could work for a solo and I didn't have to seek out the bigger firms. So I was just grateful for that flexibility that I was able to get benefits through my spouse. And so now he works, for the government. And so we get benefits and, I've never needed to. So,
yeah.
I mean, if I needed to, I think with my business at this point, I could, do something if I needed to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's nice. I mean, obviously it's great. I do not get benefits through my spouse, but I have the option to if I need to. So I kind of feel like it's almost like a safety net. So I don't have to like worry as much as I would, if I just had to go out and get them just independently, which can be a little bit pricey. So it's, definitely helpful, but it is something that kind of people have to take into consideration. Obviously, there are benefits of being a regular employee, at least for people who are getting benefits. Obviously, not everyone gets benefits, but if you're in a job where you get benefits, that's a big plus. And getting a regular paycheck, no matter what's going on with your freelance business, is also a really big plus of being a regular employee as well. But, there are so many paralegals who are out there working for smaller companies that are not getting benefits anyway. So it's kind of not that big of a difference. Do you feel that you have kind of a better work-life balance and like more flexibility and freedom doing freelance than you did working as a regular employee?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, early on, I did it part-time just for extra pocket change. I was grateful enough that my husband made enough money to where my income didn't matter if we paid the bills. So the people that are jumping into freelance and thinking this is my sole income, you really have to either have a really good savings and really good plan, because it really took 2 to 3 years. I mean, I didn't advertise. I don't do these things. It's, I was just doing it part-time, but it took like at least 3 years for me to get to like my full-time, what I worked in office level. And then it's now taken like to the 5th year, because I've been doing it 6 years, to make more than I did in office. And so, but you have to look at things like your quarterly tax payments, you have to withhold, you're paying self-employment tax, you're doing these things, that you wouldn't do, if you were an employee. And, and California has specific rules with independent contractors. So if you can get someone to kind of get by AB5, I, live in the Midwest, but work for California, so I can kind of get around it, because, my employment state is in the Midwest, so it's interesting that you have to be knowledgeable about taxes and quarterlies and things that you didn't expect to anymore. And now you're a bill collector and you're keeping your time. And if you don't bill your time, you're not getting paid. And so respecting the time that you do work and knowing it's going to take some time. I mean, I can't see someone going out freelance and then, getting 40 hours a week of work. You really have to build it. I have probably a network of 10 to 12 attorneys I work with. Some I do a couple projects a year. Some I do projects every day. And it's like, some attorneys may be slow this month for whatever reason, and other attorneys are, so some month it may be this attorney I do more work for, but I don't, I really don't. I may get 6 calls a day from 6 different attorneys. Hey, what's with this project? Hey, with this case? And you have to be able to juggle. You have to be able to meet deadlines and understand expectations of, hey, when do you need this X project by? And, having those expectations, if something's they give me a project and I'm like, wow, that's going to probably take a lot of time. I have to communicate with them saying, you realize this is going to take, with my accounting, sometimes if they're messy in many years, it may take hours and hours, like weeks. And I have to tell them, do you understand that this is going to be like a 30 something hour plus project? And it's going to take me at least a month to get through this, to know like this is not coming tomorrow. And it's just having those expectations with your attorneys. I don't work for the public. So not any at all. Everything I do is with an attorney. So, so it's interesting, just the difference being able, you thought it was hard to balance just your couple attorneys in office. Now you're balancing like, this, and some attorneys don't, they know you work for other people, but then they really don't think you work for other people. So setting boundaries, but I can go like run up to Starbucks if I need to in the middle of the day, and I don't have to tell nobody. I don't, if I have a doctor's appointment, I can just go in the morning and then show up at my, computer and respond to emails. So it's so much more in my mental health, not saying like I have to be there 8:30 to 5. And especially if it's a slow week, I got things doing. If my kid has some school performance, I could shoot out in the afternoon, pick it up, come back, and I can work into the evening because I'm billing my time. So if I choose to work on a Saturday, it's because I'm choosing to work on a Saturday, but I'm getting paid for it.
Yeah.
So it's different from when I was in office. In office, I'm like, I'm not on the clock, man. I'm not, this can wait till Monday. But if I choose to work Saturday and take Thursday off, that's, so it's really made my, mental health, because I have an autoimmune. So I deal with fatigue a lot with this autoimmune. And so if I wake up and I'm having a flare of this autoimmune, I can crash after the kids go to school for an extra hour. I can wake up again and do a solid 6 hours of billable time. But if I, sometimes in the office, I struggled with health, and then I get sick and be in the hospital. And so it was one of the main reasons we left full-time office, is because I was running myself into the ground, not because the work was hard or I was working. I just needed to take care of my health, and it worked out really well. So here I am 6 years later. Yes. Surprise, I have like a full-time business, and I'm like, wow, where did this happen? Yeah. It's kind of, it's good to know, especially with COVID. Now, some of the attorneys that wouldn't have used me before now are using me. Like the one attorney in LA that I got referred to that I do a lot of work for now, because a couple of mine have retired. I thought, oh crap, these 2 attorneys are retiring that gave me a chunk of my work. How am I going to fill that? Well, this younger attorney, and I don't think he really thought, over the computer, not in office, was going to work out. And then COVID hit. And then after like 2 or 3 weeks, he's like, I can see how this can work. And we have Teams and we have video calls, I have access to the server. And surprisingly, it worked out. But I don't think if it was not for COVID, I don't think he would have used me as much. And so now, he's like, I could pretty much employ you for the next 20 years doing this. And it doesn't matter that I'm not in California. And so it was interesting to see how, I always say that I was a pioneer in this work from home stuff, and it works. It can, but you have to be disciplined. You have to have the right setup, kind of thing, and the right mindset to really be successful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that COVID in a way is kind of a blessing for people who really want to work from home, even in a traditional kind of employment situation, but also people who want to go out and freelance, because I think so many attorneys are seeing like, oh, maybe we can make this work. I mean, for the longest time, remote opportunities, like even as a regular employee, were kind of reserved for, people who had been with the firm for like 20 years and then they wanted to move, or they wanted to like just retire or dial it back a little bit. And the firm would kind of say like, oh, well, like we really don't want to lose this person. So let's, make an exception and we'll work with them to like work from home, on a part-time basis or something like that. And I think now, because of everything that's happened in the past almost 2 years, I think we're going to see a lot more opportunities from traditional work from home, but also for freelance. And I think that that's part of the reason that we're seeing like such a big influx of individuals who are more interested in freelancing now than they are in working as regular employees. They've kind of gotten a taste for it, or they're seeing that it's definitely possible, and definitely getting, the feel for how much nicer it is to work from home and not have to commute into the office every day. I know I am. I think it's just going to open like a lot more opportunities for people.
And to think that technology has come, like if you would have said when I started, like in the early 90s, like we didn't even have emails, like we were still in DOS programming,
Yeah.
So it's like I'm one of the quote older ones. I was trained by the old guard of the people that worked on typewriters.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have the technology to do this. So you had to be in office. The phones were there, the clients came in, now we have the technology, to see that where we are now, where we have like everything we can almost do by our phone. We can take meetings, client calls. Like I have 2 phones on my desk for various attorneys. I have 2 apps on my phone for other attorneys that I can spoof my call to make it look like I'm calling from the office. And we didn't do this 10 years ago, so I think this pandemic kind of hit at the right time with the technology of where it's been. And then it's really kind of shot off. Like no one knew what Zoom was in March of last year. We didn't know, we never thought to take a video meeting. I mean, we would take conference calls, but to say, with my work with estate planning, it's huge because we need to see that the person has capacity. We need to see that the person, there isn't somebody over their shoulder telling them what to say. So having the video calls for some of these to make changes to documents, we then have the reassurance. We can record this video and use it as evidence later to say, this is the wishes of this person later. And so, so it's interesting to see, but we didn't have the technology even like 5 to 10 years ago to be able to manage this. So I think technology and COVID really helped. And I think now attorneys are saying, I don't need this huge office space. I don't need to pay for this. We can work it out. Like I bill out my hours, at whatever rate they bill me at, and the attorney pays me a chunk. So for them, they're making a profit off me, guaranteed. So they wouldn't keep me on if I didn't. So it's huge now that I have I make the firm money and they don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to pay insurance. They don't have to pay these things. And so it's working out for a lot more people.
Yeah, it really is. So let me just ask you one final question, just since you kind of touched on fees. How did you decide how much you were going to charge your attorneys?
It started out that whatever I was making in office, we calculated what the attorney was paying for my employment rate, went to that and just added a few bucks. And so I started out there. And then when I started working with the other attorney, he was like, no, you got to pay yourself more. And so it actually raised my rate a little bit. And then about a year later, he's like, oh, no, charge me more. And he says, you're really valuable to me. And he says, because what they bill out to the clients, they're still making a healthy profit. So they helped encourage me to raise my rate to where now, I'm making much more I ever made in office. And it works out. And, when I get that new referral to someone and I say, this is my rate, I haven't had anybody blink my eyes, and they don't question it because they know what rate they can bill me out. They can do the math. I work for tax attorneys for the most part, so they can do the math and go, yeah, that'll work. And they appreciate my experience is they're paying for my experience to be able to do a job in probably a tenth of the amount of time that, a baby paralegal would do it. And so, I can do these things. So, it may take, and that's how attorneys bill. So some of those attorneys that are billing those top dollars, you're billing because they have that experience, and a job that would take an associate, an hour takes them 15 minutes. And so you're compensating for that time. So, I've never had a problem with it. And now I'm like, now I can kind of say, I kind of demand it, I command this rate, and it's worked out really well. I mean, so I was a little surprised at first, like, oh my God, I'm going to charge them how much money per hour? And then I'm like, but I'm worth that much per hour, and then I was like, and then they pay me, I still got to pay my computers, my upkeep, my Dropbox, my Word software. So then I'm paying these things out of pocket that would have come out of the attorney's pocket. So you have to consider that as well, like any annual fees, CLEs, I do myself now. And so, you have to say, this is my time is worth it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree.
So it's hard, but you got to be able to back up with your work product. That to demand a higher rate, you have to perform.
I agree. Well, I think that was all the questions that I had for you. Before we wrap up, did you have anything else, just generally that you wanted to share?
No, I mean, just networking. I love the paralegal page, the freelance page. Unless you're like a document preparer that's in your state to work for the public, it gives me like goosebumps every time someone's on the page saying, I want to work for the public and have no experience, and what can I charge them? And I'm like, oh,
no.
So it's like, unless you've gone through your state's, whatever document preparer, thing, you really need to work with an attorney and under that umbrella that, you're not going to get sued for, unauthorized practice of law. Everything I do is supervised by an attorney, even after 25 years, and that's, I rely upon that. I'm not going to, so it just, those things on the page sometimes give me goosebumps. I'm like, oh, no, we don't do this. And there's a reason why.
Yeah.
And so just to make sure that people, it's like, unless you go through your state's program and get licensed, it's really important that you stay working with attorneys. And
yeah. I agree. Well, thank you so much for taking this time to talk with me today. I really, really enjoyed it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of share some insights into what you're doing and what's worked for you and, some advice for the other people in the group. I really, really appreciate it.
And I'm a mentor, and the people like us need to mentor to where, in California, there's a few states and trust paralegals that will just message me once in a while with random questions. And I'm like, look, I'm always here for you to answer these questions if you need to, the ones that work in office, so it's like just being available to the new paralegals is like almost like a duty of mine, just to say like, I'm here to help, because it is a big scary thing working in law and figuring out all these ins and outs and different court systems. So I was trained by people that had the patience to train. And so just to give that back to the younger people to say, no, you got this, we can get through it. Here's how you work through it. I think it's huge to be supportive to the young people with those questions and to help train the new generation of paralegals.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree.
So just having the positive aspects. We're all in it together. Like, don't be a snot, don't be, things, literally we're all in different places. And, Linda, you keep a great handle on the people that are just being ridiculous. And I don't know how you have the time of the day to do it, but you do. And I think it's fabulous that, that you are able to keep like a humble look, but then keep like, it's like being mother to like 5,000 people.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoy it though. I really enjoy it. And honestly, it's people like you who really make it worth it, because obviously I'm just one person. I just have my own experiences and, my own opinions. And it's so funny. Sometimes people will reach out to me and say like, oh, can I like just get your opinion? And I'm like, well, you can just get my opinion, but I'm just one person. My opinion is not always right. It's just my opinion. It's, based on my own experiences and my own, background. And I think that that's what makes the group so great. I mean, I can obviously share my own opinion, but everyone can share their opinions. And I think that's, really where the value lies, is that you can get feedback from different people and get different opinions and, kind of see like how you feel about them. And it doesn't just have to be one person saying like, this is how you do it. I mean, obviously there's some things that are like, this is how you have to do it, but
for the people who are working 60 hours a week in the office with no overtime pay, and they're like killing themselves. And I'm like, God, why are you, it is important, especially for the ones that are wanting to break in and be a name for themselves, to get in the higher positions, it just takes time. But killing yourself by working for someone else's business is just, if something happened to you next week, they would have a replacement, and if they have and if they don't respect you enough to hire in the help and stuff, just to see how much of an advocate you are for people to say, stop killing yourself, stop working for free, stop. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so great that there's somebody out there that literally tells people, your attorney's taking advantage of you. There are great attorneys, but there are also crappy ones. So, so just having, it isn't just because you work for one crappy toxic attorney, they're probably like that in all aspects of their life. It really does. You do have to really look for those, gems that really fit with you. And is it always going to be perfect every day? No, but at least you can have the respect from your attorney and your firm. And that's, it's just, I'm so glad there's somebody just every single day telling them, stop doing this.
I feel like it's my mission to make people understand like that, like completely that, but also it kind of hurts me like emotionally a little bit that there's always someone that then comes in and says, but if you are not willing to do that, you're not dedicated to your job. And like a little part of my soul dies every time somebody says that. And somebody just said it yesterday. And I was like, well, I'm really happy that that works for you and that you're happy in that situation, but not everyone's happy in that situation. And just because you're happy in that situation now doesn't mean that 10 years from now, after you've worked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours unpaid and you haven't had benefits and all of this stuff has been going on, you're going to look back and be like, man, I shouldn't have been doing that, or I should have demanded like
paralegals that want to start families and they're like, I don't know if I can wing it. It's like, like girls and guys, and it's like, no, you can have a balance. We're still a person that has a family if you choose to, if you have, kids, and then they're worried that they're not going to be able to advance. And it's like, no, your dedication and your learning your job and doing it well is going to get you those promotions. And being strategic, the grass isn't always greener when you jump firms. But, you have to be strategic about what you're doing, getting your education, but then also just respecting yourself to say, that you're not in this situation. So I'm just grateful that you're telling these people to stop killing themselves. It's just, we all have life. And if your attorney can't figure that out, granted, there's the ones that have too much life and, but
you have to find that balance.
You got to have a balance. And if the attorney doesn't respect that, and like people are saying, I don't even get like PTO, I don't get a time off, and it's like, well, then your attorney doesn't respect you.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. So telling the new paralegals, not even just the freelance ones, but just telling the new paralegals how important it is to just, every boss in every industry has those crappy bosses, and just to look for, don't give up on being a paralegal just because you get a few bad,
I completely agree.
So, well, I will see your post later, and
yes, thank you so much again for taking the time.
No, always here. If you need anything, just let me know.
Thank you. I will see you in the group.
Thanks, Linda.
Bye.
Bye.